My name is Dr. Vijay Mule. I am from Vaticanol, India. I take opportunity here to welcome you all on Vaticanol India virtual interaction platform. The name of this program is Veterinary Expert Speaks. This is a digital initiative designed for sharing latest technical knowledge and updates related to the veterinary field from expert point of view. I would like to thank all the registered participants who have joined this webinar through the Zoom link platform. Also those participants who are viewing this Go Live program on timeline of Vaticanol India Facebook page. Having said that, today's topic of seminar is lumpy skin disease, therapeutic and preventive approach. There is a reason behind choosing this particular topic. LSD is recognized as transboundary and emerging disease affecting the cattle and buffalo population. Multiple states of India are witnessing the clinical cases and outbreaks of lumpy skin disease, a DNA viral infection belonging to pox virus family. LSD is contagious and viral disease of bovines now started spreading in some of the cattle populations in some of the states of India. It is an emerging disease transmitted by the vectors having major socio-economic impact with declining overall health and productivity of the dairy animals. As it is an emerging and new disease for field veterinarians of India, there is need to understand various aspects related to this disease. This webinar is our effort to spread the awareness on overview of lumpy skin disease and discussion on therapeutic and preventive management protocol. Now, at this virtual platform, let us understand this topic from expert point of view. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our today's speaker of the program, who is eminent scientist and versatile personality in the field of veterinary medicine. He is a known person in the veterinary fraternity. He is none other than Dr. A. Samad. I would like to thank you, Dr. A. Samad sir, for being with us for next 1.5 hours. I would like to take you all through his short profile and some of his credentials. His biodata is very vast, but I would like to cover in short in 2 minutes what are his important credentials. Dr. Samad is eminent scientist and a renowned expert in the field of veterinary medicine. His special area of interest is epidemiology and preventive medicine. He was former dean of Bombay Veterinary College, Parel, former dean and director of instruction of Maharashtra Animal and Fishery Science University, Nagpur. He was head of department for veterinary medicine, Bombay Veterinary College. He works on several projects and completed successfully in Bombay Veterinary College, like veterinary nuclear medicine laboratory, nano drug delivery system in the veterinary field. For his recipient of patents related to nano drug delivery system in collaboration with UDCT Mumbai. He also has worked a lot of work on Herdman software module for data recording system in dairy for education to the stakeholders, vets, and dairy farmer. He is a member of India's National Advisory Commission on Milk Production and Farmers issued by the Indian Dairy Association. He is also a member of Research Advisory Council of National Innovation Foundation of Government of India. He is consultant to various dairy cooperatives and dairy farms in India. He is presently working as a founder and director of Vetware as an organization. He is advisor to Vet Helpline Private Limited, and he is also consultant on editorial board and chief person of IndianCattle.com. So there are various achievements other than this, but I have covered some of the important Dr. Samad's credentials and achievement. He has also guided several students during his tenure in academics with the Bombay Veterinary College as well as university assignment. So with this brief introduction, I call upon Dr. Samad sir to deliver his presentation on topic lumpy skin disease, therapeutic and preventive approach. Thank you, sir. Now over to you for this webinar.
Thank you, Vijay, for the nice introduction. I'd like to make few changes. I was for 2 terms on the advisory board of the National Innovation Foundation, but right now I'm not associated with that organization. with that, I would like to start my one moment. I'll just share my screen. You see, today's topic, as you all know, is lumpy skin disease in bovines. And let me tell you that I have not personally done any research work on this disease, because this is something which has emerged recently. And I'm also aware that there have been few webinars on the same topic. Just yesterday, Dr. Bikane gave a nice lecture on this topic. He's a very good clinician, and he is connected to field, so he described nicely about the disease. So what I thought was that I should address you on certain lateral issues related with lumpy skin disease, and maybe maybe take you to certain new research areas. I could get hands on a number of research papers which have recently emerged. Especially, I tried to screen the literature from 2015 onwards, because that is the period which looks to be quite interesting from the point of view of the molecular biology. So I'll not be touching upon the usual things like symptoms and those things. Those might be referred to or mentioned during the course of when I'll be describing about certain experiments which have been done, and they look quite credible and interesting, and should open up the minds of the vet to know how to approach tackling this particular disease. So with that preamble, let me start with the causative agent. As you all know, it's a DNA virus, and it has got genetic identities. And this is something very interesting, that the entire pox group is having genetic identities, and this identity on full genome analysis appears to be around 96%. And remember, this only 4% difference has led to the difference in virulence as well as the host specificity. Then lumpy skin disease is known to occur in two lineages, and this has come about after 2015. When a lot of genomic analysis of the outbreaks in Balkan region as well as in Russia, Turkey as well as Europe has taken place, and there they have come to conclusion that the virus has got two lineages. One lineage is the field isolate, and the second one is the lineage which has happened because of certain vaccine strains. So about that I will be talking in the later phases. There is an evidence of naturally occurring recombinant. This is a phenomenon which should alert all of us. And I'll deal with this aspect in some detail when I will be talking about vaccination. Interestingly, although we say that there is 96% genomic identity, but there appears to be strict host range, and this host range strictness appears to be now being challenged. That probably enough of investigations were not done, and because the viruses, whether it is RNA or DNA viruses, since these will for replication purpose, these will get inserted into the host genome, and if there are certain concurrent viral infections, and those viruses are also getting merged with the host genome for purpose of replication, then accidentally or by design there might be changes which might happen, and host range or jumping of the host becomes a real possibility. And therefore, as a practitioner in the field, we have to keep an eye. I mean, it's not to alert the general public or create a panic, but this is something which we need to keep in mind based on the historical data about the pox viruses. There are some other ruminants like antelopes, where the disease has been reported. This is the sequencing which has been done. So the whole genome sequencing is done, and precisely now we know what are the areas which are common areas, and what are the areas that are different. Interestingly, you see, most of these viruses have conserved, and general epitopes, predominant epitopes which are linked with replication. And since insertion into the host genome, then multiplication, and then assembling of the assembling of the virus particles, and then insertion, and then coming out of the coming out of the cell with those signal kind of peptides, all these appear to be quite common for the viruses. So it so if you look at the genomic analysis, you'll find that these are the genes which are pretty conserved, even though there are host differences, these are the one which are conserved. So the genome consists of 151 kbp, and it's a central coding region is bounded by identical inserted terminal repeats and contains 156 putative genes. So it has got 156 putative genes. And not necessarily, once we say it is putative genes, it is not certain that all of these genes are active. Some genes might be active at some point of time, and some may be switched on, some may be switched off. But there are functional putative genes which are 156. So that is the potential. Then lumpy skin disease also share a high degree of collinearity and amino acid identity, about 65% genes of other known mammalian pox viruses. Okay, so there is a similarity, and this similarity appears to be because of a common parent. So it appears that there was a common parent, and from common parent with the evolution of the viruses, some mutations took place, and then because of these mutations you have new kinds of viruses which develop specificity for a particular host. The highest conservation occurs with genes involved in basic replicatives. So this I have already mentioned that, since when these viruses evolve, you can understand these are so intelligent that they understand what are the common things which will be required, so they don't disturb that. So anything that is required for replication of things that is not disturbed, so they just copy it from the parent. Whereas the other part, which will define the microenvironment for the host, for the virus. For example, let's say a virus has jumped from X species to Y species. Now, in Y species, if it has to multiply and survive, it has to make certain changes to become amicable to the new host. So in that case, they start having mutation, and those mutations lead to the survival. And if it is possible, successful, then there is a jumping of host. And fortunately, these kind of accidents are not very common, though are rare, but that does happen, and because of which there is jumping of the host. The data shows that although lumpy skin disease virus is closely related to other members, but it contains a unique complement of genes which is responsible for viral host range and virulence. And this is thought to be around 34 genes, in the terminal end. And these 34 genes will be elaborating certain, proteins, proteins or receptors or other, facilitating molecules, which will allow the viruses to stick to a particular host. And when you look at the genomic details of lumpy skin disease and the sheep pox and the goat pox, the researchers suggest that probably sheep pox and goat pox viruses have come from lumpy skin disease. So lumpy skin disease probably is thought to be the parent of sheep and goat, because teeth and bit from lumpy skin disease has been taken by both these viruses. And there is also another fact which is also mentioned in research papers, that lumpy skin disease was first identified in 1929 in Zambia, and then from there it has spread, whereas this sheep pox and goat pox are described in the 1st century AD, and goat pox was reported in Northern America and Southern Europe in 1880s. So there is still a confusion that although lumpy skin disease was recognized quite late, but it could be there in the population since a long period of time. So there is a the message I'm going to try to pass on to you is there is a similarity between sheep pox, goat pox, and lumpy skin disease. Now, pathogenesis. As far as lumpy skin disease is concerned, it's generally held that it multiplies in epithelial cells, and after multiplication epithelial cells, the adjoining cells will be also affected. But there is also viremia has been reported, and this viremia appears to be biphasic or triphasic, and generally it depends on the appearance of the nodules. And these nodules might not appear as a crop in one crop, but it might appear in different crops. And whenever there is one crop comes, you have a febrile reaction, and then the fever subsides, then you have another crop which is coming, and then again you have a febrile reaction. So such kind of phases of febrile reaction you'd be able to see. And it might run a shorter duration sickness, or it might also be a longer duration sickness, where as long as 40 days the lesions might appear in phases, and then animal will be sick for that period of time. Then as far as transmission is concerned, we all know that it is transmitted by arthropod vectors, mosquitoes. There are also reports that ticks like Rhipicephalus and Hyaloma could also be involved in transmission. And the transmission appears to be mechanical transmission. As far as the current status of the knowledge about multiplication of the virus within the vector host is concerned, people believe that it is still mechanical. That means that when virus goes into the vector, it doesn't multiply in the vector body, but it is mechanically transmitted from one to another. Another route of transmission which is likely to happen is also use of needles. So if and this was what I had pointed out when I had visited Bangladesh, and involved in looking at number of outbreaks in the farm. And there I found that there were many farms where for vaccination or for purpose of giving injections, they were using a single needle, and with that needle they were injecting lots of animals without sterilization in between. So needle inoculation appears to be an important factor, where you have got paravets who are not really very careful, or where there are farmers who are injecting themselves and they are not taking care of this hygienic practices. So there it is possible, and this is also very important for other hematoprotozoan like anaplasmosis, theileriosis or babesiosis, where needle transmission could happen if you are using same needle number of times. There are experimental models, and I would be describing one of the experimental model where where a good research was done in a vector-proof experimental station, and I'll be giving you details of how and what is the outcome of that experiment, and is there anything we should learn from it. As I have told you, vector transmission is the one which is thought to be predominant. People thought that probably contact and other means like saliva or through feed, fomites, etc. is not possible. But now there is a question mark over it, and there is a very robust evidence that by contact as well as by inhalation, especially when the lesions are in the dusty stage. At that point of time, if there is some kind of grooming, or when the an animal is scratching itself, and the barn could become infected with the dust, having virion particles, and that could be one of the potential areas where we have to be very careful of transmission. Even for zoonotic transmission also, which I'll be describing in the later phase, is usually thought that this was because of either inhalation or because of contact, because because the cases which have been reported from certain countries are the one who were working in the meat related trade, and they were handling offal, and so they were the one who were also living in very unsanitary or unhygienic conditions. So the transmission could take place, and that we would be describing later on. Now, as I have mentioned to you, that there was a very good control study, which was done, where bulls were taken in 3 groups. Group 1 was the one where the virulent virus was inoculated, and this was the virus which was a recombinant kind of virus, which was not a field type virus. So there was no chance that the animals would have been exposed to that this kind of recombinant virus. So that was zero as far as the serological evidence is concerned. So they took a set of bulls, and they were inoculated with this particular virus strain. And then after some time, when there was viremia and the clinical illness developed in these inoculated animals, they introduced another group of animals which were in contact with this inoculated group of animals. And then they were observed, for a period of time for symptoms as well as for serological evidence of any transmission of the disease. And then after some time, a third group of animals were introduced, and then they were observed, as to what has happened. So, and all these bulls were housed in a vector control environment. So there was no chance that vector transmission would take place. So basically, a very robust kind of control study was done. This is the result that after inoculation, of course, since the virus was inoculated inside the body, classical lumpy skin disease symptoms developed. But when the other bulls were introduced, in contact, the first group of animal, they found that there were lesions which appeared. For example, this is one of the lesion which was seen on day 2. This is of course in the inoculated animal, and then later on different types of symptoms developed and they also found that after a brief incubation period, the in contact animal which are called C1, I told you that first set of bulls were introduced, so those were called C1 first contact animal group. So they also developed different symptoms, and these are the symptoms are classical for lumpy skin disease. There was also mandibular edema. These are the viremia which was recorded, and this viremia was recorded both in blood as well as ocular swabs and nasal swab. So this will tell you that the virus, although it is epitheliotropic, it basically multiplies in epithelium, but it also goes into blood. So there is a active viremia, and this is the stage where if the vector is feeding on these animals, they will be picking up the virus load, and from there they would be transferring virus particles to other susceptible animals. So you can see that there are phases that you have viremia, then which is coming down, and this is the second group of contact animals which after coming in contact, they are now showing viremia, and then the virus come down, and then again there is a raise, and this is the third group of the in contact animals, and here also you can see that there is a viremia and this virus going on. And you can see here that in the third group of in contact bulls, which were not directly in contact with the inoculated bull, but they were in contact with the in contact bull of the inoculated one. They had viremia, which was not very high, and it was also transitory, but there was viremia. Similarly, the viruses also shed in different secretions. This is the ocular swab. So even ocular swab also the virus was recorded, and you can see that this is also there in. Similarly, you can see in nasal swab. So that means that after multiplication and going to blood, virus is getting spread to even other internal organs, and therefore lesions other than what we see on the skin are also quite possible. And since this is going throughout the body organs, so it's very likely that latent infection would remain over there, and then might be surge of infection might also occur. So these are some of the symptoms which have been recorded in the in contact animals. And ultimately, the C1 group of animal as well as C2 group of animals developed very classical signs. So the whole pattern appears to be that if transmission is through vector, then the disease duration is the emergence of the disease or the symptoms which will emerge will be quite fast. Whereas if it is in contact either with the initial group or with the second group, there is contracting of the virus, and this contracting of virus takes a longer time for multiplication. But ultimately, even in contact animals also suffer from a similar kind of symptoms, which is quite extensive. So this proves that there is likelihood that even virus could be transmitted through contact. This is again a very interesting finding in the same experiment, where they have demonstrated that the in contact animals, although will show viremia for a shorter period of time, as well as symptoms which could be as severe as you see in the inoculated animals. But here they show that probably the seroreactivity or the seroconversion is not similar when it is when it is inoculated or when there is a vector transmission. So in this situation, one has to be very clear that there could be you could have situations where the neutralizing antibodies for purpose of serosurveillance, if you're doing, might be very high. But if it is also very low, then you cannot say that this animal might have not been exposed to. So this is a kind of complication one is likely to happen. So here the situation would be, suppose if you if you go to a farm and in the farm you have few animals showing very high titer and few animals which had clinical signs, but they are not showing sufficient titer. It could be because in those animals the transmission was not through vector, because this is also known that even if there is vector transmission, vector probably would not be able to transmit to 100% of the animals, because there are a number of chances which you have to count here. The first chance is at the time of feeding of the vector, the virus should be present in blood in sufficient quantity. Then at the time of this vector, again going back and feeding to another in contact animal should also be able to penetrate to good extent, and at that point of time should also be able to transmit the virus. So taking all these probabilities, it appears that in a farm by vector inoculation, around 30 to 50% cases might be seen. Whereas if the entire farm is affected, probably the other farms could be because of the contact transmission. Then is it zoonotic importance? Well, there is one paper which has been published, and I have gone through that paper very critically. The research journal where it is published is quite credible journal, and the experiment which has been performed and the evidence, it's not an experiment basically, it's an investigation which has been done, appears to be quite robust and quite defendable. Here, the author describes, I think around 6-7 cases where transmission of lumpy skin disease they have reported have happened, and this is because these were the people who were working in the meat industry, and probably they came in contact with the offals over there, and through offals this was transmitted. So either it's suspected that either it could be inhalation transmission which could take place when these people are coming closely in contact with an affected animal, and if you are grooming the animal and the skin regions dust are getting aerosol, and through that aerosol inhalation could take place. This paper also describes something very interesting, and that is they propose that at least in human, we have to really look for evidence in case of animals. It has a postulate that herpes virus helps the lumpy skin disease virus for multiplication, and this is not this is not just a coincidental or co-infection that they could get herpes virus as well as lumpy skin disease virus isolation and demonstration of the virus particles through electron microscopy as well as the PCR. Of course, I'm not seen there is evidence of herpes virus in PCR, but electron microscopy appears to be herpes virus integrated with the genome, host genome. So it is not just incidental, but it is getting inserted. So earlier, we used to think that because of interferon or because of several factors, if you have got one virus, it won't allow another virus to come and multiply. So that was what we were taught in virology. But now it appears that there are also friendship between different viruses, and they try to help out each other in multiplication and changing of the host. So in this paper, they describe that the herpes virus was also demonstrated along with the lumpy skin disease virus. And you can see the lesions here. The lesions appears to be very similar to what we see in in case of cattle. There's one of my students from I think Sholapur also sent me, because this I had put a query after reading this article. I had put a query in some of the groups in which I am there, and I wanted to find out if the field vets who are attending to outbreaks have seen any human case. And there is one veterinarian who sent me a photograph from Sholapur, and he has he suspects that probably this particular farmer was in contact with the infected cattle, and he developed certain signs which are typical. I have masked this gentleman because this is just a a case where lesion has been shown, and we are not sure whether it was really because of lumpy skin disease. So just for purpose of privacy, I have masked this gentleman. But there is a potential, and the vets should now be very careful that whenever they go and attend this outbreak, they should specifically ask if there is also human illness, and there are lesions which are very similar to lumpy skin disease. And I fervently hope that it has not crossed the host strictness in and gone to human, and probably this is one of the isolated cases which might have happened because of the patient being immunocompromised, under nutrition. So probably this might not happen in general population, but one has to be very careful, and the symptoms are very similar. You may also be aware that I have that herpes is very common. I have attended a large number of herpes mammalitis outbreaks, especially in buffaloes. And something interesting which I am seeing right now, I am trying to find out whether water buffaloes are also having this particular cases during this epidemic. I have not got much information about that. But herpes mammalitis appears to be very common in buffaloes. I have attended large number of epidemics in RA colony, as well as in Panvel, Bhiwandi, these areas. And I have seen herpes whenever there is herpes membolitis, there are some symptoms which are seen on the hands of the milkers. So some extent accidental transmission and probably multiplication on the skin, and some lesions are possible even for herpes. So although herpes is common in buffaloes, we need to really check whether lumpy skin disease is also there in water buffaloes, and if it is there, whether the symptomatology is similar to what we see in cattle. That needs to be really ascertained. I have just tried to explain here that the entire pox group appears to be affecting some or the other way to human, the entire family. You may be remembering the good old experiment where there used to be cowpox, and Jenner he encountered that those people who were milking cows with pox developed legion, and these were the people who were resistant to smallpox. Although smallpox is slightly different in than the cowpox, but there appears to be antigenic similarity, and therefore some kind of protection has taken place. So this is what I have tried to show here, that there are lesions. This is there is another disease which is very common in sheep and goat. We call it ORF, vesicular exanthema, also common. That is also of zoonotic importance, although it is classified as a parapox group, but that disease is also transmitted. So that's why I suspect that there is a great potential that all these pox group of viruses might become potentially crossing host from one species to another species, and therefore we have to be very careful, especially because earlier we were having smallpox vaccination, but now we have stopped smallpox vaccination, I think from 1980s onwards, and therefore you will have new generation of young ones who are not protected against pox viruses, and hopefully they would not be really susceptible. But that is something which we need to keep an eye, but not to create any panic, but just a kind of alertness to the vet that we should be careful and keep our eyes open whenever we witness such an outbreak. Try to even ask the farmers or in contact people whether they are also having certain lesions. Now we come to treatment. Now you're all aware that as far as treatment is concerned, since it's a viral disease, there is no viral treatment. But in case of human, they have tried antiviral disease, and they have got good results when antiviral is combined with antibiotic and other supporting treatment. I don't know how far this antiviral treatment would be practical in animals, and the costing and other things, but at least some field veterinarians should be able to use acyclovir or other kinds of antiviral substances to just check whether at the initial stages only, if we are able to control viremia and control spread of the infection, it could be tried. Now, for secondary infection, which is likely to happen because you have got skin lesions, and those skin lesions become open, and therefore they are open to barn environment where there is lot of bacterial load. So there could be secondary bacterial infection. So you could try antibiotic, and remember you should pick up those antibiotics which are known to penetrate and go to skin compartment, preferring at least a larger portion of that goes to the skin compartment. So amoxicillin, tetracycline, and cephalosporins are the group of drugs which are advisable, which are known to be good for skin diseases. In case of human patients, they have tried ceftriaxone is a preferred antibiotic, and they got good results with that. Interestingly, this paper also mentions that the virus is very susceptible to ascorbic acid and glacial acetic acid. So if you can wash the skin wounds with glacial acetic acid or ascorbic acid 20%, the virus would be killed immediately. And there is also another product which has been used, called bee venom ointment. But I checked on internet about bee venom extract and bee venom ointment. But since this is being used in case of as a beauty kind of lotions, those are very expensive, and I don't think it will be possible for the farmers to buy such kind of ointment of 10 gram or 15 gram worth 3,500 rupees. So you could stick to say ascorbic acid or glacial acetic acid. Now ascorbic acid also, I checked the literature about availability of ascorbic acid ointment or lotion or wound wash. There are few products that are available, but then I also went through the literature about the stability and other parameters of ascorbic acid, and it says that ascorbic acid is not very stable in water, and therefore it's when you are having a lotion or in ointment form, its effectivity is not good beyond 14 days. There are people who have used derivatives of ascorbic acid like sodium ascorbate and other compounds, but they are not as effective as ascorbic acid. But glacial acetic acid is quite good, so you can use glacial acetic acid as a wash. I'm not aware. I have gone through the literature, but I have not got good information about other disinfectant on this virus. But these are the two which could be used. Then there are people also using all sorts of medicines. You can see WhatsApp flooded with all kinds of suggestions, right from herbs to everything, homeopathy, everything is there. But we really don't know whether those are really effective, and there are no placebo controlled trials or really credible trials which have happened. So while picking up, you have to be the vet has to be very careful, because you don't want farmers to spend on something where there is no credible evidence available to you. So evaluate the available evidence. If it looks rational to you, then only you should use. If somebody is saying that you use this as feed this oral, and the lesions will disappear, you have to use your own wisdom to really verify whether what you are feeding is stable in rumen against the microbial digestion, because that is the oven where everything is burnt by bacteria, and everything is burnt to elemental carbon nitrogen, which is captured by amino acid, captured by microbe, converted into amino acid, and those are the microbes which will be then indirectly giving you the nutrients. So in that situation, whatever you are feeding, is it really stable in rumen? Will it withstand the all the hostile environment, anaerobic environment, as well as the attack of so many microbes, where things like lignin, cellulose is also destroyed? Whether you think there would be stability. After that, do you think it will be absorbed in circulation, and from circulation, is it going to go to the skin and take care of the skin region? If there is a claim that it is this is something where if you can't say anything, just say it is immunopotential. Now there is no proof immunopotential. You need to prove the immunopotential characteristic of a particular compound. So you should ask for all these questions and not fall prey to people who would like to exploit the opportunity, come out with different formulations and fool people and start marketing. Because even if it is marketed once with somebody and with millions of farmers in the market, he has made his money. So then whether it really works or doesn't work, he is not bothered about that. About anti-inflammatory drug, again there is a question mark, because most of the current anti-inflammatory drug acts through COX-1, COX-2 inhibition pathway, and here the inflammation appears to be slightly different than this pathway. So whether that is going to be useful or some other anti-inflammatory agent is to be used, that also you need to consider. Diuretics, again, diuretics, I would like to warn the vets here that, you have to differentiate between inflammatory edema and non-inflammatory edema. So inflammatory edema is because of inflammation, and therefore it may not be useful to use diuretic over there. If you are able to contain inflammation, the edema will automatically be contained, because it's a localized edema, and that localized edema is because of local inflammation. Whereas diuretic are to be used when you have non-inflammatory fluid which effuses out into cavities, and you want to get rid of that through either loop diuretics or other kind of diuretics. There you can use diuretic. One more caution here, that since there is a suspicion that by inhalation it could be transmitted, vets should wear mask when you are treating these cases, and you have to be very careful. All the private security and safety measures must be taken. Similarly, you should also advise farmers to wear mask whenever they are going near affected animals, and if they are grooming the animals. So if they are have potential to come in contact with the dust particles, then you need to warn them. Let's come to control. Now in control, you may be knowing that we have a law. It's a national law, and it's a law which has been promulgated by the Parliament. So it is applicable to all the states. So all the states now have notified this as applicable to them. So let's look at this law and see what we are doing. Are we doing things as per the law? Are the departments doing things as per the law? We can discuss here. Now, if you look at this law and go to the schedule of disease, lumpy skin disease is listed there. And it's not only one disease, a whole long list of diseases. And you'll be surprised, anaplasmosis is there, babesiosis is there, theileriosis is there, brucellosis, tuberculosis, all those diseases are there, which are notifiable disease. Now, once it is there in the schedule, what does the law say? The law says that as per section 4.3, every veterinarian must report a suspected case to the nearest public veterinarian. And now the definition of a veterinarian here is any person who is having a veterinary qualification by which he is able to treat a case. That means he's a registered veterinarian, may not be a government vet, even a private vet. If he sees a case and if he has sufficient suspicion that this is a case of lumpy skin disease, he need not confirm. He need not forward any confirmatory test, etc. Is not his domain. If he feels that there is a disease which is a notifiable disease and he has encountered that particular disease, under section 4.3, he should report this to the public veterinary officer. And the public veterinary officer is again those officers who are notified under the Act as an officer who are having certain powers given in the Act. And all these state governments are they are all required to notify the names and the designations of all those officers who are empowered to implement the Act. Okay, so that is the definition of a public veterinary officer. So under section 5, the public veterinary officer should inform the owner. Now the onus of information to the owner that the cattle is having a notifiable disease falls on the public veterinary officer, and the public veterinary officer has to use his own judgment in the initial stage, and if he is sufficiently convinced that it's a based on his past experience, it is a notifiable disease, he can ask the owner to take certain measures, and those measures have also been defined in the Act. And at the same time, if there are large number of cases, the public veterinary officer is has to inform the competent officers, and those competent officers also are to be notified. So the whole linkage of how this notified disease appearance in a population will be brought to the notice of the director of the animal husbandry or the another competent person within the department, is mentioned over there, and then the competent authority will be notifying control area. He's not going to notify a disease, because disease is already there, in the schedule. So what he will now do is, inform through, newspapers or other kinds of notifications, areas that are affected with the disease. And once that is notified, then certain actions are expected from the public veterinary officers, like, control of movement and other things. So that is all very well defined. So we need to really consider, are we doing, as per, what the law says. As per section 7.1, the public veterinarian should prohibit movement of affected animals by issuing written orders under the act. So he has to inform the farmer that, his animal is suffering from a notifiable disease, and therefore he is not going to move this animal out of a particular area. So, like, confinement of it. But this has to be done only, you just cannot go and tell owner that, oh, okay, don't move. No, it has to be done only when the competent authority has issued a notification and notifying an area as a control area. Then only you can do that. Section 8.1, 2 and 3 deals with vaccination and certification. And very clearly it says that all the vaccinations against, when you are doing against, those notifiable diseases like foot and mouth disease, or, hemorrhagic septicemia, black quarter, all those diseases, it says that vaccination should be done along with branding of the animal for identification that it is a vaccinated animal, or tagging, or whatever a competent authority notifies for purpose of identifying vaccinated animals from unvaccinated animals. So I think most of the states have now come up, with a strategy that for every vaccination, there will also be, ear tagging. And there are a lot of vets, I have talked to, they were complaining that, what is this, we cannot do both the things at the same time, tagging as well as, vaccination. This becomes too much. But, this is the requirement in the law, that, you have to do that. And the secondary requirement here is that you should also, the farmer should also get a vaccination certificate that, his animal is, vaccinated against a notifiable disease. And whenever he, or whenever there is a movement of cattle, during, such a period, he has to keep that record to show at the checkpost that, the animal is vaccinated and free from that. So are we really issuing this vaccination certificate when we are doing FMD, HSBQ, is again a question, we should ask to ourselves. As per section 14.1, the state must create as many quarantine camps as possible. And these quarantine camps, has to be, distributed, in different areas, so that whenever there is a notifiable disease, and after reporting, you have to quarantine a particular animal which is affected. Especially it is mentioned that all, checkposts, should have a quarantine facility, so that at the quarantine, if you suspect that there is an animal which is having a notified disease, would be able to quarantine. Section 35.3 deals with penalty, and the penalty could be as high as 6 months of jail, or with fine for breach of any provisions which is given in the act. So the act appears to be quite comprehensive and strict, and I think this, if it is properly implemented and notified, this would give a lot of legal powers in the hands of the public veterinary officers to enter into any barn where it is suspected, or forcibly asking the owner to vaccinate even if he is not willing to vaccinate. So all those kind of powers the vets will be able to get. Yeah. Now, in many countries like in Canada, USA, they also notify the private practitioners as purpose of an act. For example, you have a outbreak of foot and mouth disease, or you would like to involve the private veterinarians in foot and mouth disease vaccination program. So for that purpose, they notify the private veterinarians as public servant, and then to that extent they get powers of entry, powers of vaccination, handling, and all those kind, and also get protection from anything that has happened, which is during the course of the doing a public service, if something happens, they are also covered. So these are some of the legal aspects which I wanted to convey to you, not related with lumpy skin disease, but overall. There are also certain points which I thought I should also discuss with you. We use these terms quite often, but probably we don't understand subtle differences between them, and maybe we use it loosely, but we know that what exactly is the meaning. Now, endemic, generally we say a disease is endemic when you have a disease which is there in the population throughout the year, maybe seasonal, but throughout the year, and the rate is constant. Like you have some degree of range, and within that range, a disease always there. So we say it is an endemic disease, and therefore we do not worry about it. I mean, worry about in the sense that it is there in the population. We call it we call it epidemic when the occurrence of the disease exceeds that threshold, and usually that threshold, epidemiologists take that threshold because when the incidence of the disease or occurrence of the disease goes beyond 2 standard deviations. So whenever we talk of ratios, we also talk of a range, plus minus some standard deviation. So if within that range, if it exceeds, then we call it an epidemic. And when a disease is present in more than one countries at the same time, maybe with different occurrence rates, but still we call it pandemic, like we have this corona as a pandemic. There is another term which very commonly use, incidence and prevalence. There is a very remarkable difference between the two. Incidence is always related with time. So we will always say that the incidence of a disease per month or per year, or per 2 years, per 3 years, per lactation. There is always a denominator which is per year time interval. Whereas prevalence has no time interval. We are talking about a disease occurrence at a particular point of time. Let's say, for example, I go to a farm and then I do subclinical mastitis testing, and then I say prevalence of subclinical mastitis in this farm is 5%. Whereas if I do clinical mastitis throughout the year and then calculate and then say that subclinical mastitis or clinical mastitis in a farm, the incidence rate per year is this much. So that is the difference. We should. Then there is also a difference between crude morbidity and crude mortality. Morbidity means you have number of sick people, maybe of any disease, divided by number of susceptible population multiplied by 100 in percentage. Crude mortality, again, number of people who are dead. Here we are not considering about any disease. Number of people who are dead divided by number of susceptible population, and not number of people who are affected. So that becomes case fatality rate. When you are saying that because of corona so many people have died, so there we would be calculating it by number of people who have died from corona divided by number of people who were affected with corona. Okay. So that is case fatality rate. So these are some of the indices which you should be aware of. Then we come to the last part, prevention part. Now for prevention, currently we don't have any vaccine available over here. But I've looked at what is the prevention strategies followed in different countries, and there are two different groups of countries who are implementing this prevention program by vaccination. One group of countries where they are using heterologous vaccine. That means a vaccine which is not lumpy skin disease, but it's probably sheeppox or goatpox vaccine, which shares antigenic similarity and gives protection. And there is another group of countries who are doing lumpy skin disease. Here it is live attenuated virus vaccine, which is used for vaccination program. So these are two different. Now for LSDV, that is the attenuated vaccine, which is a live vaccine. Needling strain is the one which is but no, there is also lumpy vaccine that is available by MSD Animal Health. I don't know whether this is available in India. There is On The Spot Biological Product is another company which is marketing this needling vaccine. There are also other vaccines that are available. These are all different strains which have been field isolated from different regions. But there are countries, I have told you, that they have used sheeppox or the goatpox vaccine also for vaccinating. And the overall different literature which I have read about the efficacy of control measures by vaccination in these countries, the overall picture emerges that if you are using heterologous vaccine, the prevention is not as good as you are using a lumpy skin disease, a homologous vaccine. And it also depends on what is the heterologous strain you are using, like sheep pox or goat pox strain you are using, because there are certain strains who have got good antigenic similarity for purpose of providing protection, whereas other strain may not have. There is one strain which was very earlier used, which is called a Kenyan sheep and goat pox strain. So that was isolated from Kenya, and that strain was used for vaccination. But then later on it turned out that although they were saying it is a Kenyan sheep and goat pox virus, now it is believed that it was not a sheep and pox virus, it was actually a lumpy skin disease virus only. And that's why, to some extent in those countries, KSGP strain also gave good protection. And then people thought that probably sheep and goat pox vaccine would also be giving similar protection, but the experience in different countries is not uniform. These are some of the problems with attenuation, because when you do attenuation, it's very difficult to find out a point where you would stop attenuation so that virulence is sufficiently less for the animal to which we are vaccinating, but the antigenicity remains same, the immunopotency remains same. So it's a very tight walk, because the immunogenicity is also dependent on, and you want to lower down the virulence by attenuation. So where exactly you need to keep a balance becomes an issue, and that's why attenuated live virus vaccine are to be really tested properly for immunogenicity, immunopotency, as well as for virulence in persons where vaccination has been given. Now, vaccination strategy generally in all these countries, they have followed regional vaccination and not ring vaccination. And this is especially you should keep in mind that wherever there are vector transmitted disease, there ring vaccination does not work, because vectors would transmit disease to a longer distances. Like it is known that you have as far as lumpy skin disease is concerned, there are reports that you have a focus of outbreak, and then suddenly you find 50 kilometers away you have another focus of outbreak, and then another 50-60 kilometers which immediately starts. So this may not be because of only movement of animals, so it is a vector transmission. So there it is said that you have to go for a regional vaccination program rather than ring vaccination. Now, when it comes to live attenuated vaccine, yearly vaccination is recommended, whereas if a cattle has already suffered from a clinical illness, generally it is held that it gives lifelong immunity. So once a cattle is affected, you don't have to worry about vaccinating. There is also another problem with the vaccination during the outbreak, in the sense that if there is an outbreak and in outbreak field strain is involved, and then there are cattle which are in subclinical stage, they have not shown any disease, they are having low virus load, and there you are doing a attenuated virus vaccination, something which is very different. Then there is a complication, and people have reported that there could be a recombination of field virus and the vaccination virus, and you could get a new virus which is a recombinant virus, which is a mix of field as well as the vaccine. And this then it so happens that the virus which you were using for vaccination becomes virulent and causes the disease. So this has been recorded in case of lumpy skin disease. Now, lumpy skin disease vaccine could also give local reaction, and that is acceptable. About 5 to 10% cases will show local reaction. Now, this is the experience which has which I have collected from Balkan area outbreaks that have been reported and investigated. In 2015, in Europe and Balkan region, the vaccination strategy was followed. So they had disease outbreaks quite widespread. So they thought that they would start vaccinating, and different adjoining countries started vaccinating in different forms. For example, Europe and Balkan area, they started using attenuated live lumpy skin disease virus vaccine. Whereas Turkey, Georgia, Russia, they started with sheeppox virus vaccine. And then in 2015 and 2016, they did genomic analysis and confirmed that the virus was field strain. So the outbreaks that happened between 2015 to 2016, they were all because of the field strain virus. But in 2017, when they started investigating the outbreaks, they found that the outbreaks were because of the variant of field strain. And in 2018, they found that the outbreak was due to recombinant vaccine like Isoniazid. So this is how the story goes. And then the inference is that there is a likelihood that you have cattle which are co-infected with field strain, and the field strain is a low grade of infection where you don't see any sign, and in the same animal you have injected another strain which is attenuated strain, and then both the strain are getting mixed up in the genome, host genome for multiplication, and you have a new recombinant strain that becomes virulent. So these are some of the things which the veterinarians should keep in mind. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to describe in some detail here, because people feel that running a disease control program or preventive medicine program is extremely simple. What is there? Yeah. You have a vaccine available, vaccinate kar do sabko and it's all done. No, it's not as simple as that. There are lots of consequences of whatever you are doing, and that you need to keep in mind. There is also a new area that is emerging, which is called as microbiome theory, where now people are demonstrating that every individual is surrounded by billions of bacteria on the skin, in the uterus, inside body, everywhere. You have good bacteria which are 95 to 99% are good bacteria. Then you also have 1% which are pathogenic bacteria. And now the evidence is emerging that if you are doing vaccination, then by vaccination, and I'm giving you an example of a paper I read about pneumococci, where children were vaccinated against pneumococci, and then the microbiome of those children which were vaccinated and those which are not vaccinated, where the profile were compared and studied for a longer period of time. And they found that when children are vaccinated against pneumococci vaccine, in the microbiome they don't get pneumococci, but its space is occupied some other pathogen. So that means there is a space the nature has given for pathogenic bacteria as well as for commensal, and everybody respect that space. So if you want to kick out from that space a pathogenic bacteria, probably another bacteria would come and occupy that space. So the whole scenario is likely to change. We have to rethink about the vaccination and the consequences of vaccinations, and all those things will come up. So because of all these new technologies, we are now getting insight into all these interventions which we do, and I think over time period we are going to get a lot of good ideas which will emerge from these investigations which are taking place. Now this is my final slide. Just like to summarize what are the take-home messages. Lumpy skin disease virus is probably a mother virus, which has evolved from a mother virus for sheep and goat pox viruses. Of course, this is just a inference I have got. We need to really find out, what is true, as we go along. Out of 156, genes, putative genes or potential genes, 34 genes determine host specificity and virulence. So therefore, most of the virus of these families would be differing in these 34 genes and 34 gene products. Primarily, the disease is seen in cattle, water, and buffalo. Around 50% cattle suffer biphasic fever or triphasic fever, depending upon the crop of lesions that are going to appear. And therefore, one has to tell the farmer that he has to be very patient and look at the crops of lesions that are occurring on the cattle. Although transmission is through vectors, but as I have given you an evidence that it is possible through contact, so one has to be factor in this in the control program. And also, you need to tell the farmers that to be on safer side. If there is a cattle which is suffering from lumpy skin disease, maybe taken slightly away from other cattle so that it is not transmitted, and the farmer himself also observes all the biosecurity measures. Suppurative therapy and antibiotic and washing of lesions with glacial acetic acid, ascorbic acid. So I think this is something new. Even I found out after reading the literature that the sensitivity of the virus is more towards glacial acetic acid and ascorbic acid. There are reports of human transmissions, and therefore need not panic, but we should remember that there is a potential, and therefore we have to be on a lookout and be careful and ask farmers about if there is a disease, that you should observe some caution, and if there is any lesion that you should be recording, and at least we should be discussing amongst ourselves so that we are ready for any jumping of the host. The theory of co-infection with herpes virus, especially herpes 2 virus, in case of human being, needs to be seriously considered, because there are herpes 2 outbreaks, like infection, mammalitis. Herpes mammalitis is common in cattle, and live attenuated vaccine usage with monitoring of genomics is important. So there are a lot of people who were asking me about, should we start goat pox vaccination, because goat pox vaccination appears to be giving good protection against lumpy skin disease. So I think we should not jump to this conclusion unless and until the government of India or the state authorities advise us to start this kind of heterologous vaccination program. Because if you start heterologous vaccination program, then you also have to be ready with monitoring of any recombinance that is taking place in the population. So with this thing, I have completed whatever I wanted to discuss with you, and I leave this floor back to Dr. Muley for comments and for any questions that audience might have.
Thank you so much, sir, for this elaborative and informative discussion on this topic, which is considered as an emerging disease for the cattle and buffaloes. We have received more than 70-80 questions. We'll try to cover some of the important questions which have similarity from the audience. And the first question related to this topic is, as you are expert from the epidemiology and preventive medicine, where should we categorize this disease, like as per the spread of disease or patterns of the disease, whether it is epidemic, like it is a localized epidemic, or what kind of this disease is? It is endemic, epidemic?
Okay. You see, as I have told you that endemic diseases are those which are normally present, and they are seen over years and years. Okay, so then we call it is an endemic disease over here. Say, for example, if I have theileriosis, which is 5%, then I would say, if it is 5%, then I would say it is endemic. Theileriosis is an endemic disease. So if a farm is having, say, out of 100, only 3 or 4 animals which have suffered from theileriosis in a year, we won't classify that as an epidemic. Classify that theileriosis is an endemic disease, and it is within the range. But suppose in the same farm, out of 150 animals are now showing theileriosis, then we would say it is an epidemic of theileriosis. for that farm. Okay, so it all depends on the competent authority to define what is the location. If it is a state level authority, the state level authority will consider state as a unit. But if it is a DHO, a competent authority, he will consider district as a unit of notification. And if he is a block level veterinary officer and who is authorized to notify disease under the act, then he would consider his block as the area, and within the block he can say, okay, these are 4 villages where there are lots of cases of lumpy skin disease, and that I declare as a control area. So, and in that area, you would be notifying the epidemic. So it all depends on the the mandate of the competent authority, and the competent authority would always look at the spread of the disease. If they have to say that it's a state level epidemic, then I would say at least 30% of the districts within the state, if they have reported a disease which is not normally present, and there is a reasonable suspicion by the competent authority that this might even spread to other 70% of the states in future, then you can notify the disease as a state epidemic. And the same thing will happen with the Commissioner of Animal Husbandry. If he is a competent authority to declare a national epidemic, then he would consider the potential of how many states this has taken place, and what is the potential of its spread to other states where there is currently no disease. So all these factors will be considered to notify. This is a very notifying a disease is a very responsible action.
Yes.
Because there is a cascade of activity that has to take place after notification officially. So therefore, always the competent authorities are always very careful. But we start saying what government is doing, what the state government is doing. They are doing nothing. But notifying requires a lot of evidence to be collected, and certainty of the notifying authority that this is a disease, that this is the same disease which is not incidental but spreading, then only it is notified.
Correct. Then the next question is that what is the morbidity rate and mortality rate of LSD, and whether they are asymptomatic carriers of the disease, and what is the incubation period?
I have not seen any report in the literature about the surveillance and detection of virus in asymptomatic cattle. So I'll not be able to comment on this aspect. But in general, it's said that the morbidity is high, but the mortality is less than 1% or 2%. So you don't have very high mortality. But morbidity, depending upon how close the density of the animals within the area, the population of the vector, the season, all these factors counts in morbidity. But morbidity, as I have said, could be as high as 50% at a farm level.
Okay. So there is no
in Bangladesh, I have seen a number of outbreaks. I visited a number of farms where 90% of the cattle were showing classical cutaneous lesions.
Cutaneous lesions.
Yeah.
Thank you for that information. Now the next question is that you said, sir, these vectors are the important transmitters of the disease. So how does exactly vector they transmit? Does the remains in their saliva, and then once they jump from one host to the another host, they bite and they transmit through the skin?
See, as far as lumpy skin disease is concerned, I tried to find out what is the exact mode of transmission through vector, and the bulk of evidence is in favor of mechanical transmission. Okay. Now, mechanical transmission means the virus is not having a life cycle in the vector. So it is not multiplying, like we see in Sicifly or others, where trypanosomes would be multiplying. So there are life cycle phases in the vector, and whenever there are life cycle phases in the vector, usually these would emerge through saliva. Whereas if it is non cyclical, where there is no replication taking place within the vector. I think it is simple, blood laden, which is there, blood which is there in the probiosis, and when it is feeding on another host, that contaminated blood is getting inserted into a new host. So that the bulk of evidence appears to be favoring this, but we'll wait. We'll
Yes,
wait
yes.
for future evidence to emerge.
Correct. So there are various questions related to the clinical approach. What should be the clinical approach of the veterinarians toward this disease, and what should be the clinical as well as treatment approach?
Okay. You see, as far as the clinical approach is concerned, it's a viral disease, and there is no specific antiviral drug we are using in case of animals. As I have said that in few cases where human contacts were investigated, they have used antiviral drug like acyclovir. So if you feel that this could be tried in animals, that you can think of, but as of now, at least I have not used any antiviral drug in lumpy skin disease or any other such disease. So now you end up with only one possibility, that to check secondary infection. And to check secondary infection, you can use antibiotics. And since the lesions are more towards the skin, therefore you need to be selective. Select those antibiotics which are partitioned in skin compartment preferentially. So I've given you some names like amoxicillin and tetracycline, ceftriaxone. Those are the antibiotics which can be used parenterally. And again, when you are injecting antibiotic, please see that you use one needle only for one animal, and for another animal use the second needle. Now for washing of wound, I have suggested you can use either 20% ascorbic acid, or you can use glacial acetic acid. And for ascorbic acid, my suggestion would be you can carry ascorbic acid powder with you, and prepare a roughly 15-20% solution there itself, because you would be doing a wash. So wash will require a large fluid requirement. So you can just prepare there and give a wash of to all the lesions with ascorbic acid. I am trying to get in touch with the pharmaceutic people to find out if we can also what is the pharmacopoeia of glacial acetic acid, whether I can use glacial acetic acid as it is, or some concentration will be required, because the paper which I have read, they have only mentioned about glacial acetic acid. They have not mentioned anything about its dilution. So I have to get confirmation about the pharmacopoeic concentration of glacial acetic acid, and then maybe I would be able to comment on that. So these are the two disinfectants or antiviral wash which have been suggested. So this can be done, and then wearing mask and other things. If you feel that there is a high fever which is causing discomfort, then you can also use antibiotic and anti-inflammatory. But I personally do not use antibiotic whenever there is a viral infection, for the precise reason that viral fever in any virus infection is a part of defense mechanism, and this defense mechanism is going to lead to immune response and immunity. And I don't want to unnecessarily hamper this immune response and get less immunity from the viral infection by using antibiotic. So personally, I don't use any antibiotic to use. And generally, you would also you must have also known that even in old days, our dadis, our nanis, used to say that whenever there is vaccination is done, kuch nahi karo, let there be good fever. At the most, they would have some cold sponging, other things, and then this fever will subside, and then you'll get better immunities. But if you keep on hampering this immune response in viral infections by intervening in the immunity pathway, then you are going to have less immunity and maybe recurrent infections of those viruses. Because of course that is what I do. But the general prescription would be, if fever is not hampering the day-to-day function of the animal, don't do anything.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this. The next question is that whether the immunomodulator drugs like levomisol can be helpful in this disease, and can local application of chlorhexidine or our kitchen vinegar is also can be used for the lesions. First
You
is
see,
immunomodulator and
you say
the
kitchen vinegar is acetic acid.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's what I have told you. But I don't know because it will depend on the kitchen vinegar concentration.
Correct.
As I have said that most of the papers have described glacial acetic acid. So glacial acetic acid means concentrated acetic acid. But
Correct.
since this acetic acid, even if it is glacial, is not really highly acidic and not corrosive. Therefore, it is called glacial acetic acid. But we need to. I need to find out. I'll come back. Within 2-3 days on this aspect, and maybe on WhatsApp group, I'll be able to tell you what should be the concentration of glacial acetic acid as per the pharmacopoeia you can use. But certainly ascorbic acid you can use. Ascorbic acid in powder form is available. It's highly soluble in water, so you don't have to worry. You have to just take clean water, prepare around 15 to 20% solution, and give a wash to the animal so that you don't have a lot of virion particles in the dust.
Correct.
Chlorhexidine, when I have not got any paper which suggests chlorhexidine is effective against pox group of viruses.
Correct. So once the animal gets affected with LSD, you said, sir, that that animal gets immunity, lifelong immunity. But like a FMD, we usually observe that after that FMD happens, there are a lot of post FMD complications or sequelae of the disease. So is that LSD also has a lot of that adverse effect on the body after the this disease happens to the host? Yeah.
See, I've
What
not
long-term effects of the disease?
I've not done much study on this. My observation is based on the epidemics which I attended in Bangladesh, and there when I went to different farms, there I was told that there were cases which were as old as 3 years back. Lumpy skin disease had come, but still those were showing skin lesions like pox. Like in case of pox, you see, even if somebody is treated with pox, there are pox-like lesions are still permanently there on the skin. So those kind of lesions I could see there. And the farmers also narrated that all these cows which were affected with lumpy skin disease are having problem with fertility. Subfertility is there. Then they have not resumed that production level which is expected of genetic potential of those cows. And then there are also reports coming out from human cases that the virus has been demonstrated in different organs. And as I have also shown you that virus have been also demonstrated in ocular secretions, have been also demonstrated in other secretions. So it could spread within the body, and if the virus is spreading inside the visceral organs, and if it is going to remain there, it would definitely cause some complications. So I think in India now the time has come to really think seriously of starting a vaccination program for lumpy skin disease. Bangladesh has already started lumpy skin disease vaccination. Libya, Turkey, Egypt, Russia, Balkan states, they all have mandatory vaccination program for lumpy skin.
So is that a goat, sir? Thank you for that information. Is that a goat pox vaccine can be used in cattle?
As I have said, that there are some countries who have used goat pox vaccine against lumpy skin disease. So it and they say that it does give good protection compared to sheep pox. They say that it gives good protection. But it appears that a lot of this evidence has come from the that Kenyan strain, Kenyan sheep and goat pox strain which was used, and people claim that since it was a goat pox virus strain and it provided protection, but then later on it was found that that particular strain was not a goat pox strain, but it was actually lumpy skin on genomic analysis. So if that evidence is true, then we have to really find out whether goat pox would give sufficient protection, because as I have told you that we have not recorded this disease in goat as well as in sheep and in other animals, and because of the difference of host restriction, because of those 34 genes, we really, and that is the domain which is also defining this virulence. And if there is no virulence, then there is not going to be immunogenicity also. So with that logic, I have a strong doubt, whether goat pox vaccine, as a heterologous vaccine, would be giving enough of protection. It might give some protection, but enough protection to control epidemic. And that might be the reason why, still our, government officials are still deliberating on this aspect of, what kind of vaccination program should be started in the country.
Thank you, sir. The next question is that what should be the treatment protocol, like antibiotic, NSAID, or immunomodulator? These treatments has been given by the field veterinarian. What should be the duration of the treatment? It has to be followed for 5 to 7 days, or and how much time the actually skin lesions they take time to heal?
See, as I have said, as far as the treatment is concerned, if I'm not taking care of virus and not giving any antiviral disease, then I have told you the pathogenesis that you have crops of skin lesions, and therefore you have phases of viremia and phases of inflammation, phases of all those reactions is going to take place, and it might go up to 40 days. You never know. So are you going to give antibiotic and all these drugs in all the phases? Is it really practical? Those are the issues which we need to think of, or we need to give antibiotic only when we see that there is some secondary infection, or some kind of long-acting antibiotic which we need to give so that we have a longer period of protection. So, or there is no need of since there is no pneumonia or other visceral organs have been known to be affected. Should we only restrict to a local application to take care of all the regions as well as the wound? So some kind of some kind of application where we form a film on the skin lesion along with glacial acetic acid or ascorbic acid which will be released, so that skin lesions will be treated and not. So all these issues, I think we need to deliberate and discuss. So as it goes along, a lot of these new technologies will definitely come into. But as far as current scenario is concerned, I would suggest that instead of I don't like to spend farmers' drug unnecessarily, farmers' money on drugs unnecessarily. If you are really convinced that it is going to help, then please do it. But if you want to use it because a doctor has gone to an animal and something has to be done, and if you want to do that, then I think you have to really think. A number of times, all my farmers know that I am someone who quite often tells them not to use any medicine but wait for 3 days or 5 days. So so there is no harm in telling them that this is a viral disease and just wait for a few days. It may subside by itself. I'm not giving anything specific. All these immunomodulators and all these things, unless there is a robust evidence that it does help, and the robust evidence must come not from experience, my personal experience. There are people who say that, sir, मैंने ये दिया और अच्छा हो गया. That is an anecdote, which might have value to start, looking at that evidence to prove in a robust way. But that cannot be accepted as a scientific evidence that I have done it and it works with me. So there are lots of vets. I remember in old days there was one vet who said that I treat milk fever cases by giving intrauterine Mifex and not IV. But can we take that evidence as a scientific evidence and start telling everybody? So individual experience is something which I don't devalue. I don't doubt that but that has to be subsequently evaluated on a scientific basis, have good evidence, and then we can go and start asking people to use it on a longer term. So same thing, with immunomodulators. It's a very loose term.
Yes,
I don't
yes.
know. Is it giving cellular immunity? Humoral immunity. If it is cellular immunity, how you are going to show that cellular immune response has increased? How you are going to show the immune response? Is it the specific immune response or non-specific immune response? If it is non-specific immune response, what is that mediator? Are you going to demonstrate that mediator? So these are all important questions which, as a scientific person, I would ask to myself, before accepting any claim.
Right. Thank you, sir. Regarding the control method, biosecurity and the vector control and the vaccination, these three are important areas which is coming out for this disease.
You are right. And in that, I would emphasize on manure management.
Manure management also. So
that is one area which is neglected. Okay. And manure management is related with housing.
Correct.
Okay, so these two things, and those are extremely important for our farmers, because unlike Western countries, our farmers are living with animals. His house may be having a common wall with the farmer's house. So we are so close. So therefore, anything that is affecting animals and in that environment, sanitation, hygiene is going to affect the farmers. So you don't want to come to a situation where farmer is earning 100 rupees by keeping cow unhygienic and spending another 200 rupees on treating himself, because of disease. So ultimately, he has not made anything.
Correct. Correct. So how much this disease is prevalent in buffalo than the cattle? Like any specific, like buffalo is less prevalent than the cattle, or because of buffalo is by nature, it is thick skin.
Trying to collect information on buffaloes. I'm not getting much on it. I have myself seen only a few cases, but at that point of time, honestly, I thought those are buffalo pox.
Okay.
But now I have to rethink, whether those were really buffalo pox or, they were, cases of buffalo pox is general, you can see lesions. That is what I thought, that, buffalo pox is not restricted to, mammary gland, but, could also happen on other areas. But I may be wrong, because we did not investigate whether those were cases of LSD. So I keep, that comment reserved. But I'm collecting information as it comes. So let's hope. But the participants, who are working out in field would be in a better position to answer this question, whether they have recorded more cases in buffaloes, compared to cattle.
Right. So there is one question that as a mass vaccination of FMD brucellosis under NADCP program, which is taken in the mission mode, there is simultaneous use of goat pox and FMD vaccine in animal result in adequate seroconversion for both FMD and LSD, thereby reduce the logistic hardship of visiting the farmers repeatedly.
Okay. I read one paper. I think it's from Turkey. I think Turkey. I read one paper where for same logistic reason, they were thinking of coming out with a combined vaccine of lumpy skin and sheeppox to be given simultaneously. But as far as India is concerned, let our national authorities first decide whether we would like to go for a national vaccination program, and then we can think of all those questions. So right now I don't think there is any notification that has come from Government of India on lumpy skin disease, and therefore I what is the thought process going on, whether the vaccination, are they going to import vaccine, that still we don't know. So okay. we have to wait for it.
Okay. Any relation of environment or climate in spreading the disease, like any favorable environment that helps the virus to spread?
You see, definitely any vector-borne disease is going to be related with climate, because the vector multiplication is related with climate. So during warm weather and climate, where there is humidity, there these multiplication will take place. There are also reports that even domestic fly, your house fly, can also transmit, lumpy skin disease virus. But how robust is the evidence, you don't know. So all these are, related with number one, climate, and number two, sanitation and hygiene. Of course, climate we can't change, but sanitation, hygiene is in our hand. So, no, I think one should be telling to farmer to observe some basic level of sanitation and hygiene standards. The problem is we either we are very highly regulated, or we are absolutely not regulated. So we don't have any regulation. What should be the space required for a cow? So minimum, farmer should have that much of space. Farmer can bring any cow, tie anywhere, and his dairy farm starts. He doesn't have anything, for disposal of dung, etc. So he may be causing problems. So you can see in Mumbai, Jogeshwari area, highly populated area, and in one corner you have 10 buffalo farm, and that guy is dumping all the dung and urine into the into common sewage. So there has to be some basic standard, because that is going to affect a very large section of population. They may not be very strict considering our farmer situation, but there has to be, you can't just bring an animal and tie ek khuta laga diya sadak ke bazu mein aur mera farm start ho gaya. You can't also have that situation. So some degree of regulation is required. Then only all the sanitation, hygiene would come into play.
So there are several questions which are still coming, but I think with the time limit we have, I think we would be able to answer the question and send it to all the participants, so that they all will get benefited. Thank you so much, sir, for this informative and elaborative discussion on this topic, LSD, and its control and management, both in clinical approach as well as the preventive approach. It was a really wonderful discussion. So with this, I request Mr. Anjan Kumar Das to present the vote of thanks.
And before that, I would also like to thank Vetoquinol for this opportunity to interact with the field veterinarians, because nowadays after retirement, people not that frequently come in contact with the field vets, but through WhatsApp and other groups, people keep on asking certain questions. So I would request all those who are participating to feel free to get in touch if they have any issue. And I would like to remain in contact, because these are the areas from where I pick up the problems, and as an R&D person, who would start thinking on resolving those issues for and creating some or developing some practical solutions to it. I would also thank all the participants who have joined here, and usually people become impatient in a class after 45 minutes. And this is something very interesting. We are seeing that people are very patiently listening to, as I told you last night, I was with Bangladesh, veterinarians, and they were there for 3 hours, and they were still wanting to continue. But I said, let people go and have dinner now. So, we have to stop. So there is a hunger of knowledge, which is extremely good.
Yes.
This continues and gets translated into good activities to benefit the farmers. Thank you once again.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And yes, we'll answer the question and answer through email to all the participants. Thank you, participant, for patient listening. And sir, there is a request to share the presentation also, maybe from the participant. Over to you, Mr. Das. Yes.
Good afternoon all. So in behalf of Vetoquinol, I thank you, Dr. Samat, who is your speaker for the day, and for his brief presentation on LSD, which is a lumpy skin disease and emerging disease in India and subcontinent. And it was very interesting that his experience to the presentation was very live. When we talk about the yesterday night in the Bangladesh presentation or Bangladesh discussion, so it was coming out in his presentation, and we were really enjoying, and I hope all participants must have enjoyed. and the quality of the question which was coming from the participant looks like they were enjoying the presentation. And you started from the diagnosis to the management to the clinical, and very interesting information is the zoonotic importance of the field veterinarians, and which is very important because many veterinarians may not be knowing this. And as it is endemic and it is emerging, sir, your presentation will definitely help to all the field veterinarians for the treatment and then as well as for taking care of themselves, as well as for the farmers. If at all the information will go to the farmers, and maybe in some time we can also organize some seminar for the farmers, which they will get benefited, and the management part. So once again, our sincere thanks to all the participants, those who have taken out their valuable time on the Sunday and participated in this webinar. And we, as Dr. Mule has told that, that we have received good number of questions, but not in a position to answer all because of the time constraints. But definitely we'll address all the questions. And I will request to our product management team that, to send the answer to all the concerned participants, those who have, sent the questions. Okay. And once again, my sincere thanks to our sales and marketing team for coordinating and organizing such a beautiful webinar. And wish you all the best once again to all of you, and stay safe and stay healthy in this period and this really a challenging time we are going through. So thank you all of you, and thank you, sir, once again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Bye.
Thank you. Yeah.